talk about Solomon, the man who governed Israel with unparalleled intelligence and built the famous temple in Jerusalem. His reign was full of conquest and glory, but as his power grew, so did his temptations. In this video, we will discover how such a wise king could get lost in his choices and what lessons we can learn from Solomon's fascinating story. Before we continue, like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any fascinating stories. Solomon was born under the weight of a promise. He was the son of David, the greatest king Israel had ever known, and of Bathsheba, a woman whose story was marked by pain and overcoming. From the beginning, there was something special about this boy. He was not the firstborn, nor the oldest among his brothers, but David chose him. The harbinger of greatness was in the air, like a breeze that whispers secrets, and everyone knew that Solomon's destiny was different. When David was already old, tired of battles, and with his eyes focused on the end of his journey, he gave Solomon advice that reflected the weight of the responsibility of being king. "Follow the ways of God, my son. Only then will your throne will be firm." Imagine, then, the pressure that Solomon felt at that moment. How can such a great king succeed? How to govern a nation full of hopes and dreams? Soon after his father's death, Solomon found himself facing his first challenge. Israel's internal and external enemies were lying in wait, waiting for the right moment to test the young king. What to do? Where to run? Doubts weighed on his mind. But then one night, God appeared to him in a dream and made him a surprising offer. "Ask whatever you want, and I will give it to you." And now, what would you ask for the young man king in the face of such a powerful offer? Solomon could have asked for anything. He could have desired untold riches, vast lands, or even eternal life. But with a humble heart and an intelligence that was already showing signs of blossoming, he made a surprising request. "Lord, give me wisdom. Give me understanding to judge your people fairly," he said. Solomon knew that governing a nation was not an easy task. Israel was a chosen people, full of history, with laws and traditions that needed to be respected. How could he, a young man with no experience, make the right decisions and guide those people in the best way? He didn't ask for gold or glory. He asked for discernment so that his actions would be just and wise. God, upon hearing that request, smiled as a sign of approval. And not only did he grant the desired wisdom, but he also promised Solomon riches, honor, and a glorious reign. The young king woke up from that different dream, carrying a new burden on his shoulders, the burden of being not just a powerful king, but a wise king. Soon after that remarkable dream, Solomon's wisdom would be put to the test in an unexpected way. 2 days later, 2 women arrived at his throne, bringing with them a question that, at first glance, seemed impossible to resolve. There were 2 mothers, both claiming to be the real mother of a baby. The child, small and defenseless, was at the center of a bitter dispute. One of them said that the dead son belonged to the other, and the other countered with the same accusation. Who spoke the truth? How to decide? The court was silent, everyone paying attention to the young king. Could this be the moment when he would prove himself worthy of the throne of David? Solomon, without being shaken, looked at the 2 women and, in a firm voice, said, "Bring me a sword." The people in the hall looked at each other in confusion. A sword? What did he have in mind? The guards quickly complied with his request and brought the shining blade to the throne. So Solomon surprised everyone with his decision. "Cut the baby in half. Each mother will get half." A murmur ran through the room, and the 2 women's faces instantly changed. The first, with a sinking heart, shouted, "No, don't do that. Give the child to her. But please don't kill her." The other, in turn, accepted the judgment without hesitation. At that moment, the real mother was revealed. Solomon, with his newly God-given wisdom, understood that only a real mother would sacrifice everything for her child's life. Justice had been served, and the entire kingdom saw that Solomon was not just a king, but a different leader, capable of decisions that would be remembered throughout history. But that was just the beginning. After the judgment of the 2 mothers, The fame of Solomon's wisdom spread throughout the kingdom and beyond. The people saw him not just as a righteous king, but as a man guided by something greater, someone destined to accomplish great things. And one of these great achievements was about to begin, the construction of the temple in Jerusalem. This temple would not be an ordinary work. It would be the ultimate symbol of God's presence among the people of Israel, a place of worship and reverence, where the divine would meet the human. Since he was little, Solomon knew that this mission was reserved for him. His father, David, had dreamed of building the temple, but God charged him with another task, preparing the way for Solomon to fulfill this purpose. So the young king got to work. Gigantic stones were cut and carved. Cedar wood was brought from distant Lebanon, and artisans from all over the kingdom worked tirelessly. Solomon supervised everything closely, every detail, as if God himself was guiding him. 7 years passed until the temple was finally ready, erected in all its glory. The construction was grand, breathtaking. Anyone looking at those golden walls and imposing columns would feel a shiver run down their spine, as if they could see the finger of God in every stone. The temple in Jerusalem would become the spiritual heart of the people of Israel, a sacred place where people would come to find peace and forgiveness. With the Jerusalem temple finally completed, a new era of prosperity began in Solomon's kingdom. The young king, now at the height of his glory, saw his people flourish as never before. The caravans that crossed the lands of Israel brought riches from distant lands: gold, silver, precious stones, rare spices. The kingdom became not only the spiritual, but also the commercial center of the ancient world. Solomon, with his wisdom, knew how to manage this abundance. He made alliances with powerful kingdoms, built majestic palaces, and strengthened Israel's defenses. His name began to resonate in distant places, and stories of his wisdom and wealth crossed deserts and seas. Every day, it seemed like more and more treasures were arriving at the king's feet. But with all this prosperity also came hidden dangers. The more the gold flowed, the more the hearts of the people and of Solomon himself seemed to stray. There was a silent metaphor in the air. Just as shiny gold blinds, excess riches began to obscure what really mattered. Riches were like a broken mirror, reflecting glory on all sides but distorting the truth within. With each new treasure, a subtle change occurred in Solomon's heart. The thirst for more power and more wealth grew, like a flame that never went out. One morning, a majestic procession entered the borders of Israel. The eyes of the entire kingdom turned to the east, where the Queen of Sheba, accompanied by camels laden with gifts and servants, approached Solomon's palace. The king's fame had crossed deserts and seas, reaching the ears of the queen, who ruled a distant and prosperous kingdom. Curious and impressed, she decided to see with her own eyes if everything that was said about the wise king was true. The Queen of Sheba was not just any figure. She was a woman of great power and intelligence, known for her insight and leadership. Upon arrival, she was received with great honor, and soon found herself face to face with Solomon. But she wasn't just there to deliver gifts and marvel at the riches of the kingdom. She wanted to test the king's wisdom, to ask difficult questions, to see if he truly possessed a gift for which he was famous. In the marble halls of the palace, surrounded by carpets of gold, the queen began to question Solomon about the mysteries of life, about the nature of men and the universe. And to each question, Solomon responded with a profound calm and wisdom that seemed to flow from an inexhaustible source. The queen, little by little, became more and more impressed not only with the answers, but with the depth of the man's spirit. But as Solomon's brilliance enchanted his visitor, something began to become evident. The riches, the alliances, and now this new admiration brought with it an invisible burden. Would Solomon be able to maintain his integrity and his devotion to the God of Israel in the face of so many temptations? With the visit of the Queen of Sheba, Solomon further consolidated his fame, not only as the wisest king, but also as one of the most powerful in the region. And with this fame came many alliances. Solomon began to weave an impressive diplomatic network, marrying princesses from different kingdoms. Each marriage brought a peace treaty, a promise of friendship between Israel and other nations. The kingdom was safe, its boundaries protected, and prosperity seemed endless. But these alliances, which initially seemed advantageous, began to plant seeds that Solomon might not have immediately noticed. The wives he took, coming from distant lands, brought with them not only their riches, but also their customs and beliefs. Altars to foreign gods began to appear in Israel, small structures at first, almost unnoticed. However, over time, these influences began to grow, and faith in a single God, which had always been the pillar of Israel, began to be mixed with practices that did not belong to the chosen people. Solomon, at first, resisted. He knew his duty was to the God of his father, David. But little by little, he gave in. Living with these princesses and their cultures began to shape his decisions, and the king's heart, once completely devoted to the Lord, began to stray. Each new alliance seemed to carry with it a new altar, a new statue, a new influence over the king and his people. While the kingdom prospered externally, something began to break within. The alliances that brought peace now created confusion. Solomon, surrounded by riches and power, began to lose what was most valuable to him, his true devotion. As the years passed, Solomon, who had once been a king devoted and faithful to the God of Israel, began to lose himself amid the influences that he himself brought to his kingdom. The alliances he forged with other peoples, through marriages with foreign princesses, began to take their toll. These women came with their traditions, their beliefs, and slowly, Solomon began to deviate from the path that David, his father, taught him so much to follow. At first, they were just small gestures, an altar here, an offering there, almost without him realizing how far he was getting away. However, the king who once had built the Temple of Jerusalem, the holy place where the people worshiped the one true God, was now erecting altars to foreign gods. Sacrifices were made on high mountains, and incense was burned to pagan deities. Solomon's heart, which had once been entirely devoted to the Lord, was now divided. He did not completely renounce the God of Israel, but his loyalty was no longer exclusive. And so, the subtle betrayal unfolded, like a crack that slowly widens until the entire edifice is compromised. Each new altar he permitted was another rupture in his relationship with God. And, as expected, the consequences began to emerge. The kingdom, which once flourished in harmony and peace, now began to feel the effects of the spiritual division. The first tensions, previously invisible, manifested themselves. As time passed, Solomon began to feel empty. Even surrounded by riches, alliances, and all the power a king could want, something inside him no longer made sense. It was then that he turned to reflection. The great and wise king, who once asked God for discernment to guide his people, now asked himself, what is the real purpose of all this? It was in this state of mind that Solomon began to write the book that would later be known as Ecclesiastes. In its pages, he reflected on the vanity of all things. Vanity of vanities. Everything is vanity, he wrote. For Solomon, the riches that once fascinated him so much now seemed worthless, like a shadow that disappears at sunset. He had possessed everything, land, treasure, wisdom, and yet he felt that none of it brought true satisfaction. Life, in its essence, seemed to be like chasing the wind. You run, you strive, but in the end, what do you really achieve? This phase of Solomon's life is marked by a profound existential crisis. The man who once had all the answers now found himself surrounded by questions. The glories of his reign, the grandiose works he had built, the alliances he had forged. All of this began to seem fleeting and meaningless in the face of the immensity of time. And while Solomon was lost in his reflections, the structure of his kingdom also began to show signs of wear. The seeds of rebellion were being planted, and the echoes of dissatisfaction were beginning to spread among the people. To support the luxury of the palace, the many construction projects, and the growing alliances with foreign nations, Solomon imposed heavy taxes on the people. What once seemed like a blessing now became a burden. Murmurs of dissatisfaction began to spread through the streets and homes. Men and women who had once exalted Solomon's name now whispered on street corners about the injustices they faced. The hands that built the great temple and palaces grew tired of the king's incessant work and ever-increasing demands. The shine of gold and prosperity did not reach everyone, and on the margins of the kingdom, the spark of revolt began to be lit. Among those who felt the weight of oppression, a figure emerged willing to challenge the king. Jeroboam, a young and ambitious man, began to gain strength among the people. He saw the strain that Solomon's policies were causing and began to position himself as the voice of those who felt oppressed. Dissatisfaction was growing, and Jeroboam was not willing to remain silent.